Hi, my name is Kaylee King, and this is my endangered species project on the Mexican long-nosed bat. Some characteristics of the Mexican long-nosed bat include that it is relatively larger than most U.S. bat species, measuring at around 3 to 4 inches in length. It can be dark gray or brown in color. One of the most distinctive features is its long muzzle with a prominent triangular-shaped nose leaf at the tip. The bat also has adapted to have a long tongue that can extend up to 3 inches to allow them to feed on flower nectar. The next short video that I'm going to play gives a bit more insight into how the Mexican long-nosed bat adapted to its environment to get the tongue it has today.
If you had a tongue like some nectar-feeding bats in the Andes, it would be 9 feet long and attached to your breastbone, and would extend its full length when it was engorged in blood. How and why did these bats evolve such a long tongue, and what's the point? They had, along the course of evolution, to solve two problems. One is to feed on a particular kind of flower that has a very long neck, so they need that long tongue to get down all the way to the nectar. The other, they can't expend more energy in getting food than the amount of energy they're getting from the food. So the tongue has a maximized surface area. It looks a little bit like a long centipede with lots of appendages, and it works very well as a mop to sort of suck up a lot of the nectar and therefore get more energy each time it extends the tongue.
This slide is about the bat's reproduction. So pregnant female bats travel annually to caves in Mexico to give birth in maternity colonies. Some studies have shown that they may have two breeding peaks, one in the spring and one in September, while other studies suggest that their breeding season is limited to the month of May. In addition to their limited breeding seasons, the Mexican long-nosed bat only gives birth to one offspring at a time, which is a contributing factor to why this species is considered endangered. For the bat's habitat, they're mainly found in regions of northern Mexico and southwest Texas. One colony can be found in Big Bend National Park in the summer until they migrate to South America following the blooming of specific plants that they need for food. The preferred habitat of the bat can be described as desert scrub or pine forests. During the day, the Mexican long-nosed bat roosts in sheltered places like caves, hollow trees, and mines. Information on these bats' roosting habitats is limited, however, and there could still be more that we don't know. As for the bat's diet, the Mexican long-nosed bat is a nectarivore, feeding on the nectar of certain flowers, primarily the nectar of the agave flower. Because of the bat's physical adaptations, such as its small ears and the presence of a triangular nose leaf, it can be assumed that the bat uses its sense of smell to locate their food. The bats primarily feed at night in flocks when the agave is blooming. They are very strong flyers, and this helps them hover in the air while feeding. Their long tongues help the bat when feeding, as it can extend up to 3 inches into a plant in order to drink the nectar. Since the Mexican long-nosed bat migrates between the United States and Mexico, it can be hard to get a reliable count on the total population. New census techniques continue to be found, and the changing of techniques over the years has also made it difficult to track the population. Population declines in the Mexican long-nosed bat can be found pretty easily. One example is in an abandoned mine in Mexico, which once had an estimated population of 10,000 Mexican long-nosed bats in 1938, but had no signs of the species in 1983. Another similar mine had a ceiling covered with the newborn bats in 1967, but only one bat was found in 1983. The population of Mexican long-nosed bats at Big Bend National Park, one of the two roosting sites in the United States, widely fluctuates in numbers from one year to the next, with population estimates ranging from 0 to as many as 10,000 individuals. Mexican long-nosed bats were not always endangered. They used to thrive in certain areas of the United States and Mexico. Recently, however, the massive decline in the bat's population could not be overlooked, and the United States Fish and Wildlife Services added them to the list of endangered species in 1988. Even in Mexico, where there are fewer laws protecting bats or their roosts, the bats were listed as threatened species in 1994. One reason why the Mexican long-nosed bat has become endangered is the lack and loss of their preferred roosting habitats. Colonial roosting species such as bats are particularly vulnerable to the disturbance and destruction of their roosting habitats, since this can result in the displacement of a large number of individuals at once. Only a few roosting sites are known for the species that provide the proper roosting environment, including the correct temperature and humidity, which means that the loss of the bats' habitats is even more detrimental to their chances of survival. The loss of the bats' major food source is another reason for their population decline. Agave is a very important food source for the bats, and they are the primary blooming plants available in northern Mexico during the bats' migration in spring. When the agave is harvested, not only are they removed from the bat's present food supply, but future generations of agave plants are also eliminated. This is especially critical since a single plant grows for 10 to 20 years and flowers only once in its lifetime. Harvest of agave for the production of liquor and for the preparation of traditional sweets is the main reason for the decline in the bat's food source. Other smaller factors, such as wildfires and the clearing of rangeland areas in northern Mexico, may also reduce the food supply and thus affect bat populations. One final reason for the decline in the Mexican long-nosed bat population is the destructive control practices that are sometimes used in Mexico. In tropical Mexico, where vampire bats are a problem, ranchers and the public often consider all bats to be vampire bats, which can sometimes spread diseases to livestock and people. Many ranchers try to kill off any bats they come across in an attempt to protect their livestock. Thus, destructive control practices targeted for vampire bats often kill beneficial species. The Mexican long-nosed bat has a very important role in the ecosystem, and its presence directly and indirectly affects many biological interactions within its community. Many plants, such as agave, depend on the bat for the cross-pollination that maintains crucial genetic diversity within each plant species. Other species are dependent on plants pollinated by the bats for their food and shelter. This includes bees, moths, lizards, hummingbirds, mice, and many more. A decline in the Mexican long-nosed bat population could mean a reduction in the agave population and many other species that rely on these plants, thereby drastically changing the dynamics and interactions within the community. There is a lack of comprehensive information regarding Mexican long-nosed bats' feeding, roosting, and reproductive ecology. There are also no recent population estimates or studies for this species. Identifying and protecting additional roost sites, protecting foraging habitats, and obtaining population biology data are the three most important activities needed for Mexican long-nosed bat conservation. Research is currently underway to better understand the life history, habitat requirements, limiting factors, and management practices affecting the Mexican long-nosed bat and the plants that provide their food. Efforts by scientists to locate roosting sites are currently being initiated in Mexico. Periodic surveys are conducted to assess population status at one of the two known roosting sites in the United States, located at Big Bend National Park. Recovery efforts also include planting agave plants along roadways in northern Mexico. More than 50,000 agaves have already been planted in the last 3 years. Finally, recovery efforts include providing information to the general public and school children regarding the great diversity and importance of bats. If you enter a cave or other place where bats are present, be aware that these mammals are very sensitive to human disturbances, and it might be best if you can leave the area as soon as possible. Viewing of bats is best done by waiting outside the roost site until the bats emerge to feed in the evening. Also, because the Mexican long-nosed bat depends on agave plants for food, it would be best not to cut or otherwise disturb these plants. There are also ways that you can personally get involved in the conservation efforts of this endangered species. Being involved in the conservation of Texas's non-gamed wildlife resources by supporting the Special Non-Game and Endangered Species Conservation Fund is one way to get involved, and you can also buy special non-game stamps that are available at Texas Parks and Wildlife Department field offices and at most state parks. Part of the proceeds for these sales is used to protect habitats and provide information concerning endangered species. Another way to get involved is by joining the Texas Master Nationalist Program to learn more about bats and other wildlife and even volunteer for bat conservation. And that is all I have for my presentation. I hope you enjoyed. These are my references that I used to gather the information, and I hope you learned something about the Mexican long-nosed bat.